Okay, raise of hands. How many people know how to make a good zombie movie? Congrats! Duct tape the lab onto the end of the story, and you've got a Resident Evil movie. And yet, with 4 different adaptations, only the animated movies have gotten anywhere close. The currently 3 live-action projects have all gotten it wrong. But the other 2 were clearly not really caring about keeping it accurate. However, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City had the audacity to pretend it cared about the franchise. So, like a jilted lover, this one's going in the Grudge book. For those not in the know, Resident Evil is a survival horror series that has been the conflict of a group of characters in their battles against the many forces that seem to be making bioweapons that all lead back to an expedition by the Umbrella Corporation. Resident Evil 1 is specifically about the STARS team investigating the mysterious deaths in the Arklay Mountains, as they stumble upon the first instance of Umbrella trying to make a zombie virus under the mountain, and it's all resolved when the self-destruct goes off. Now, some would say Resident Evil 1 is far too short of a game to adapt alone. Personally, I think they're wrong, but we don't need to focus on their wrongness and point out how we have literally a B team that shows up and we can use them as extra content, as well as showing different characters, exploring different rooms, creating an eerie atmosphere on top of filling for runtime by having them move slowly, like a police unit or something. Not to mention, you could also show the outbreak moment from the point of view of the character that you've literally referenced later in the story, but you change everything about that scene. But if you are like, no, you can't do that, that's not how this story works, that's not how we're trying to adapt it, just add RE0 onto it. RE0 is the story of B-Team's medic, Rebecca Chambers, encountering another threat while in the same area of the Arklay Mountains as our A-Team. Sure, the plot of Resident Evil 0 does suck, and I will say that, hey, if you are going to do some creative license, do this. Get rid of the worst parts of this story and just tell something else while the other story's going on, because you can literally cycle between the two whenever you goddamn want, because this is how it works. But yeah, so just have a B-plot about Rebecca finding another escaped problem and resolving it at the same time as the main characters as a form of denouement, and feels the runtime without having to sacrifice large segments of RE1 or RE2, because that's what you had to do in the story. As stated prior, there has been previous and future attempts at adapting this story to screen. And also, stated before, the CGI movies have been the most accurate depictions of these things. While not being retellings, they are additional stories within the RE universe. But when, after several movies with Paul W.S. Anderson in charge, when they announced a new Resident Evil that wasn't made by him, I was a little bit optimistic. It's not hard to tell a zombie story, you just need to do it right. Again, depends on the person. There are some people that apparently can't tell a zombie story, even though they literally told a zombie story that was closer to what they should have done with their other one. Moving on. And then the first trailer for Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City came out, and I knew they had missed the point. To be fair, there was an interview that had come out before this that should have hinted me at this if I had been paying attention to those interviews. With this movie, I really wanted to go back to the original first 2 games, said Johannes Roberts to Deadline Hollywood. And there, you've already bought the adaptation. RE1 and RE2 are separate events. Putting them together makes it seem like Umbrella is a massive fucking idiot instead of just scientists that are actively fucking over people and not caring about the consequences. The fucking reason RE2 happens in Raccoon City is because the lab is in the mountains and explodes, so they need a new place and they build in the city. And apparently, it was going to be worse in the original script of Welcome to Raccoon City before budget cuts. And admittedly, some parts were apparently better, but I am willing to assume it probably would have been worse. The main changes from the budget cut rewrites is the characters were more in line with themselves, There were additional characters such as Barry, and there were also a lot more monsters in the story. But as someone who, very specifically, feels like you wasted the monsters you did have, I'm not sure having more monsters in the story would have fixed the problem of this being such a massive departure from what the original was going for. The streamlining, which is an actual problem in the story, wasn't there in the original script. To give Johannes credit, he does clearly love this franchise. But hey, there's a reason why you need to have the self-control to limit what you reference within one story. Because yeah, there's not a need for the fucking Code Veronica twins. We do not need them being referenced in the story, and yeah, that's a fucking thing for later. I'll get to it. And just to say it one more time, RE1 and RE2 are just too much to adapt at one time without massive sacrifices, and massive sacrifices were made for this story. So, I guess without further ado, here is Welcome to Raccoon City. The movie starts with Claire and Chris Redfield at the Raccoon City orphanage. Sorry, I need a moment for how dumb that changes. One night, Claire befriends an odd-looking girl named Lisa Trevor, a boss enemy from Resident Evil 1 that shouldn't even be here because she's supposed to be in the mountains. Also, she didn't look like that as a kid. Movie, are you really that fucking high? It's fine if you are, but you're kind of harshing my buzz, so could you stop being so shit? We also get to see the best casting choice in Neil McDonough as William Birkin, the scientist responsible for the G-Virus, the outbreak in Resident Evil 2, and several other notable monsters, none of which are in this movie, because fuck you. Actually, wait, one of them is. We'll get to him. Birkin takes children to be tested on, including Claire, but she escapes, and the movie cuts to 18 years later or so, because, hey, how did she escape? That's an orphanage. It's not that big. How did she get outside? How did... I've literally played through that orphanage. How the fuck did they lose her? With Claire returning to Raccoon City, we need something to happen to excite the audience. So, how about, instead of Claire using the bike to ride into town or doing the actual events of RE2 where Leon and Claire meet up over a zombie encounter, and it's kind of exciting, intense, before we actually get to the actual events of Resident Evil 2, like it was in the original, we've just decided to change the story and have it make less sense. Okay, so you know the trope of careless truck driver gets bitten and attacked by a zombie, which leads to them driving down the road like a maniac, that the original one was kind of the impetus for? Yeah, it's basically that. And instead of being bit by it, the dog, who would absolutely fucking hate to ride in a truck for hours, licks the blood off the zombie, which we saw, by the way, so he can get bitten later, because we're not fucking stupid, we know how a zombie works. Also note how we see the zombie in full view. Just make note of it. And then we get to Leon. Okay, why is Leon even in this, and why did you fucking change everything about him? Why is this Nepo baby recruit can't seem to stay awake for more than goddamn 15 minutes being called Leon? Where is the genuine dog of a fucking man who matures into an ass-kicker with a sarcastic edge caused by his trauma? Speaking of other drastic changes, the fuck you do to Wesker? Where's my barely keeping up the disguised villain? Why is this block of unfinished character here instead? Oh, and Jill's not here either, replaced by a psychopath with a gun fetish. To give all the actors credit, I can tell they're all nailing what the script says, but the script is fucking garbage, and it should have been thrown away for the sake of society. I feel bad for them, as both Leon and Jill's actors were given shit because of their race swap of the characters, even before we actually got to see a single scene of them. I feel for both these actors, along with the majority of the cast, could do all of these characters justice. I've seen the guy that... In fact, there's a single scene in this movie where Leon gets to act like Leon. It pisses me off because he doesn't act like Leon for the rest of the movie. He doesn't act like RE2 Leon or RE4 Leon for most of it. And Jill just doesn't act like it at all, and Wesker is not it either. Like, even in his post-credit scene where he's supposed to be evil, he's still just not a character.
I don't understand. I thought it was dead.
You were.
He's still an unfinished block of cheese. And it pisses me off because these are the characters I come to the story for, and they're just not here. But I would say this as well. If you weren't going to be a shit about the fact that you're adapting the story, what you'd actually do is cast the voice actors from the games. Because most of them have actually done live acting work. Jeff Shine, the current voice for Chris Redfield as a Resident Evil Village, would be a great early Chris. You didn't even need to bulk him up yet, or at least until you need to try and adapt RE5 if you're going for it, or Kevin Dornan if he says no. Nicole Tompkins, the voice of Jill Valentine for the last few instances of the character, as well as a few of the Resident Evil characters, has literally done cosplays as Jill. And if you desperately actually need to put Resident Evil 2 characters into this, like Leon and Claire, Nick Apostolados. I'm most sorry for that pronunciation of your name, Nick. But yeah, he has been nailing it in and just got a fucking award for it. And Stephanie Danicello, as Claire, was fantastic, even though she doesn't really do that much live-action acting. But I believe she could do it. Hell, the only person you really need to recast of the Resident Evil stuff right now is Wesker, and that's because DC Douglas looks nothing like Wesker and is a massive fucking creep. You know what? I'll go further and cast two characters not in the story. Barry Burton, portrayed by Jameson Price, the man who did Barry for RE5, and Rebecca Chambers, played by Erin Cahill, who was a former fucking Power Ranger. But of course, I respect voice actors, unlike most studios. And I'm gonna say this as well, you really can't say the casting choices here were for star power or funding, as the biggest 3 stars in this were Robbie Amell, Tom Hooper, and Neil McDonough. Not to sell them short, but they're all fantastic actors, and I love each of them in their own roles. But they're only real recognizable names, and even that's stretching it in Hollywood's incredibly insular system that promotes actors because of their parents' acting talents. And I will state one more time, for the record, because I want to make it absolutely clear, all of these actors did their job well. I just would have used the already existing cast with a different fucking script. Thank you. Also, it's really easy fan bait, because if you get someone like Nick Apostolados, again, apologies if I mispronounce your name yet again, if you get him to say, hey, I'm working on the new Resident Evil movie, and people are like, I love you in Resident Evil, I'll watch the thing. Because, hey, guess what? An entire YouTube channel has been doing this for a while. They made a fan film with the original live-action footage actors from the first RE1, and got a lot of RE fans watching because, hey, guess what? It showed they respected the original. Cheesy as that fucking scene was. So Gun Nut throws the plastic gun at Nepo Cop, and she steals Nut Wesker sandwich. Can't really find a character trait for this Wesker clone. Calling it Jill's sandwich. Alright, I kind of have to explain this reference and why it doesn't really work here. Jill's sandwich is a reference to a trap in Resident Evil 1, where the playable character, as Jill, escapes a crushing trap with Barry's assistance, to which he comments,
"We're almost a Jill sandwich."
You're right.
Line was said. The Resident Evil fandom started using it a little bit more frequently as a meme, including some fan art, and occasionally when Capcom would reference it, such as in Dead Rising. But as the first reference for our leads to go in for this movie, to have the fans do the point with the fucking Leo thing, no. I personally would have kept the scene from the original, as I felt a direct reference would have been done better for this rather than a tangential reference, as the humor of the scene comes from the fact that the characters were just in a life or death scenario. What I personally would have chosen for the first reference would be a Master of Unlocking joke, as one, that doesn't require actually being in the mansion to reference, as well as being an early reference in the original game. You can also do it in character with Gun Nut Jill. You can have her shoot a lock while somebody has the keys, because this way is faster, and someone says, man, Jill, you're really the Master of Unlocking. Sure, as a massive departure from the character, Chris, I'd say, is more of a gun nut than Jill, but no, neither are really on the level that the movie goes towards. But if you were going to have a reference here, I feel like Master of Unlocking would be a better choice. We cut back to Claire, who meets up with Chris just before he goes to work that day. And these two are actually the least changed from the games, but they're still needlessly changed, with Claire having a conspiracy theorist that connects her to Resident Evil 2 character Ben Bertolucci, even though the original connection was they met 5 minutes before Ben died, which worked fine because that's what Leon does. Why add this entirely pointless connection when it doesn't actually add anything and the character doesn't say anything about it in the scene? But yeah, no, but why not just keep it the reason that she's coming to Raccoon City is the same reason as always. She's trying to find her brother, and hey, I'll even let you keep the Chris Birkin connection, because even though it's streamlining it in one of the stupidest fucking ways, you could use it to be why Claire can't reach Chris, because Birkin / Umbrella's monitoring communication, because they're under the city, because that's what it should have been. Why is this not 2 fucking stories? We cut back to Birkin for a second, and that doesn't matter. And then we cut back to Chris leaving for work, and we get yet another zombie attack. This time, some mother who writes "Itchy Tasty" on the window in blood. Gonna have to pause again. Not even a full page later from my prior rant, because I had to explain yet again why this reference doesn't work. And also, of course, the reference itself, because that's actually what is also important. Itchy Tasty is the last lines written in the Keeper's diary. The significance of it was, it's one of the only instances where one of the text logs in the game showed someone changing via the text. As well as being a jump scare moment, as the one who wrote in the diary is in the closet behind you as you're reading it, and they come out after you finish the book. Having this happen here, where it could work, doesn't. Especially because we see who wrote it just before they try to startle you in the film. But it also doesn't work because it's written in blood on a window rather at the end of a diary of a slowly degrading mind. So again, I state, you missed the fucking point of the reference. And what's worse is you couldn't even give a shit and have done better this early by showing the initial outbreak from his point of view. Like the Itchy Tasty guy, like in the original story. If you had him be in the Arclight Mansion, get bitten or infected somehow, he gets locked in the room, he starts writing in a diary, you hear the lines "Itchy Tasty" in voiceover, and then you see a character walk into that room, you're like, hey, that's that room. And then, to reinforce it, picks up the book, Itchy Tasty, read by Chris or Jill or whoever, and then you see the door open behind them. And you know what it is, and they don't. And it's great. And that's what you should have done. But instead, no. Sorry, I'm genuinely upset because there was such a better scene you could make out of that reference. Admittedly, this could be a bit of an issue because, hey, you show zombies early, and it's not like you're going to try and recreate the first zombie scene from the Resident Evil just later in the movie, well after we've seen multiple zombies, isn't it? Foreshadowing is a narrative device. And the other thing that sucks is this is supposedly proof the creator knew what they were doing. When I saw this moment in the trailer, it stuck out to me as they fucked up, more than deciding to combine 2 stories that are clearly separate in the original timeline. Some people were like, but it's a deep cut. Clearly he knows this thing. And I'm like, no. Itchy Tasty is the name of the unofficial history book. It's not like as deep a cut as Chris losing his Jun and using Jill's in Resident Evil 1 Remake, or even the dog model from RE4 is Huey from Haunting Grounds. And neither are that deep a cut, in my opinion, because they're not that uncommon a fact you run across just because you're somewhat aware of the franchise, or listen to Resident Evil heads chat about stuff. Like, I do think that Johannes is a fan, I just don't think he knows fully what he's a fan of. By the way, I will get back to the Ben Bertolucci shit once it actually fucking matters, just calling it dumb for now. Once Claire escapes the zombie, she steals the bike that she was told not to steal and runs off because it doesn't fucking matter. I don't know why they even had the character mentioned, don't steal it. How about just have her have it? It's fine. We cut to the Raccoon City Police Department, and to give these sets credit, they are accurate. Now, I don't usually give special points for that. I feel it's the job of the adaptation to do that to the best of their ability, but it's still a positive, to an extent. See, the issue comes from the fact that they clearly had to cut some corners, because, see this? That's 90% green screen. The set was some parts of a set, and then a bunch of green walls, which kind of sucks to see as a fan of these locations. Now, do I believe they should have built an entire Raccoon City Police Department or a Spencer Mansion? No, but you know what have cut costs? Not putting two massive set pieces from two major titles in one movie. Both set piece locations just don't really exist, and to give the creators credit, they do use that to their best ability, but only to an extent. You don't actually get to see them running around the RPD lobby. You see them running down some hallways, and then you get to the bottom of the lobby, where they can't go up too much, because, you know, it doesn't exist. Chief Irons, played as a no-nonsense cop, even though apparently he's also a traitor, but they're not going to reference anything about that until way later, when it doesn't matter, reports the B-Team's disappearance to A-Team, composed of Chris, Jill, Albert, and Brad Vickers, an ancillary character that's purpose to run away at the start of RE1, who is taking Barry's slot as the additional. Personally, I don't have the biggest issue as replacing him, but you can also remove the one thing Brad has, his cowardice, because he doesn't run away to be in a later story, so it's not like he was accurate to himself or Barry, so why does it matter, really, writer? You could have just named him Barry. It's fine. Getting back onto target. A-Team is tasked with checking out the last reported location of B-Team, and while suiting up, Wesker gets a Palm Pilot in his locker, although he gets a message about it. You know what? It doesn't fucking matter. But I will have a minor tangent. I do want to give minor points to the choice of Palm Pilot. I had this exact Palm Pilot that was outdated by the time I had been playing with it, but I can tell this is the professional, as it's one, able to send messages, and two, has text on the side buttons and on the touchpad. I do appreciate that small level of detail, but that's really about it. The message hints at Wesker having betrayed his team repeatedly. Based on his reaction to the message, this is the first time he's even heard these people. Alpha Team, consuming most of the characters we've run across: Chris, Jill, Brad, Wesker, and I forget his name. He's one of the first to die, and despite already hearing it yelled in the past hour since writing, I have already forgotten it again. They arrive at Bravo Team's last known location, and despite this being a perfect moment to recreate the opening from Resident Evil 1, even though you already botched multiple references, I would have appreciated that as a fan. So the barely funded police force gets out their expensive helicopter and prepares... Those are modified MP5s. Okay, at least in the games, the only persons with decent firepower was the traitor and Barry. Everyone else had a pistol. Hell, Chris lost his samurai edge in the game and had to use Jill's in his scenario. I feel like it's supposed to be a joke. The poorly financed police station has a lot of guns and a helicopter, but I'm kind of feeling that line might have been from a prior draft and wasn't removed when it was reworked. So Brad stays in the helicopter while the assault team investigates the area. We cut between this and the chaos starting to build in Raccoon City, showing Leon sleeping, Claire running around and running across Birkin, who somehow recognizes her despite it being a lot of time between them, and she's also wearing a helmet that covers most of her face. We also get to see Hunk, though for a second, because he's helping lock Umbrella City down. Now, we don't see the lab on the city, mainly because the lab they focus on is from RE1, and man, this should have been 2 fucking movies. I'm gonna keep saying that. We get a head-bashingly stupid sequence of scenes where we get to see civilians in a zombie-like manner trying to get into the RPD headquarters. The gang at the HQ load up with what remains in the armory, and now, even though they've shown far too many zombie-like monsters, including dogs, the truck driver, the person who got hit by the truck driver, the itchy tasty lady, and her kid, they try to do the first zombie scene from RE1. And based on my tone, yeah, doesn't fucking work. We're almost an hour in, by the way, so yeah, really nailed the franchise. And now that one zombie that was shown, we now have 30 spawn throughout the Spencer Mansion to attack for false tension with Chris and to wipe out the extraneous characters. Way to create a problem for yourself, guys. Muzzle flash lighting is cool, but ignores the bigger problem, which is by making them swarm from seemingly nowhere and be cognizant enough to wait for food to be really nearby before attacking, these zombies aren't zombies. There's far too many, which is only because you gave Alpha Team MP5, so they needed more zombies, and I hope you're finally getting why I dislike this, because the simplicity of a zombie movie is why Resident Evil 4 being Resident Evil 1 works, so why change it? I make the response to two dicks that ignore their radio calls to send in SWAT with full automatic weapons. God. Anyway, Wesker's cousin and Jill's clone from the Anderson-verse finally get the plot going, because the Palm Pilot not only has the Resident Evil guide on it, but is also able to do impossible things, such as show piano keys. Like, the map is within reason, but piano key solutions? This fucker had a delay on solitaire. This thing ain't doing what it's doing in that scene. So Wesker solves the puzzle by playing Simon Says, just as Brad decides to play a prank on his fellow coworkers. Back at the Raccoon City Police Department, the armory turns out to be the next to the holding cells, the fifth stupidest change in this movie, but hey, the competition was over about an hour ago. And we meet the character from the tape Claire had. Why is only Leon here? Like, this is the person Claire has been communicating with. Why is she not in this room? Is it to force a scene? It feels like it's there to force a scene. You know what, Mr. Roberts? You could write a scene better so it doesn't feel contrived. You know that, right? I believe in you. Turns out the cell has a stealth zombie who's been hiding in the shadows, so much less ridiculous than a bioengineered weapon designed to track down specific people in the end of silencing whistleblowers, witnesses, and anyone foolish enough to get in its way. This plot armor does wonders for my anger of contrivance, and it's portable too! The Nokia Brad has survived the helicopter crash while the guns were decimated. And now, Wesker has a pistol when a zombie finally shows up. It also did that bad fake-out thing, because I definitely believed he was going to go full traitor and shoot. Is Jill supposed to be dating Wesker in this scene? Like, I'll admit I'm bad at telling cancer relationships, but I'm pretty sure... Oh, and he's apparently not working for Umbrella. Doesn't even care. He's doing it for the money. God, this is such a disgrace for my boy. The RPD team somehow has zombies break through a bolt with the thickness and circumference of a $50 coin, so they finally find a way to leave that the chief didn't try earlier. We get a cool-ish scene where the muzzle flash is our only light, but I do have to deduct points for how they make the zombies work in the scene, mainly because I want to wrap this shit up.
Guys! No, there's someone there.
Jill saves Chris, Leon and Claire find the exposition room referencing the Ashford twins, which ties into Code Veronica but doesn't matter, and also it's a bad game and story, so why reference the bad game in the first place? Wesker finally gets down the hallway and confronts Birkin and his family. Hey, Roberts, I've actually got a question. Why did you erase the wife? She was actually a really great character, and technically an antagonist for that final section of RE2. A mother who, while neglectful due to her and her husband's pursuit of science, making bioweapons, did care for her daughter, which is why she was kind of an antagonist in Leon's playthrough, and why... Oh, she's dead now. Wesker Clone 27 reveals how defective he is by being able to shoot a child. Jill and Chris save Sherry while Birkin monsters out. Chris and Birkin resolve their issues, and so does he and Claire. The monster effects are actually pretty good on G1, suck on G2, and it pissed me off. The end finally gets one singular Leon-like line.
Ugly fuck! Shit!
And we end on the Wesker revival, Ada Wong tease, which means nothing because Leon never met her in the story, because we decided to put these two stories together, but remove everything about the second half. The end. I feel like I've made my point here. Like, beyond the massive liberties with the story, I'd hate this movie less if it didn't combine these two stories. Especially since I gave two different options for how to add runtime to this very easily, not to mention squashing a weird chunk out of each story. Oh, and it would have killed to put put some of the music from the games in there. That's why you like literally took the design of Resident Evil 2, but you took none of the god tier music. Fuck. I genuinely think that general audience might have liked this film, but as a fan of this franchise, I'm certainly more disappointed than the Paul W.S. Anderson films. At least those dropped the act of accurately adapting Resident Evil.